Over the years, the Kiplinger Award has been bestowed on a remarkable array of great journalists, publishers, and defenders of our profession. Some have been celebrities, well known to the public at large, the likes of Ben Bradley, Diane Rehm, Kay Graham, and Frank DeFord, among others. Other Kiplinger Award winners have not been household names, but earned the respect of their peers over a lifetime of exceptional work. The likes of David Broder, Jack Germond, Eugene Patterson, Nat Hentoff, and many more. Our Kiplinger honoree tonight is in the latter category. In a career spanning a half-century, Clark Hoyt has done it all. He is a journalist's journalist, a star reporter who won a Pulitzer Prize and went on to become a Washington bureau chief and senior executive of one of the nation's most respected newspaper groups, Knight Ridder. As a bookend to this great career, Clark took on the thankless job of being the in-house ombudsman at the New York Times and then at Bloomberg. I say thankless because if the ombudsman is doing his job right, he will probably leave everybody somewhat unhappy with his verdicts, from his own newsroom to the complaining public. Clark Hoyt is still toiling in our vineyards. In semi-retirement today, he provides his experience and editing skill to Inside Climate News, the award-winning online nonprofit news service that won a Pulitzer for national reporting in 2013. When I talked to Clark recently, he said his values in journalism were formed by exceptional mentors and peers. Among them, John S. Knight, one of America's great newspaper publishers. Jim Batten, a one-time reporter and assistant city editor at the Detroit Free Press, who rose to the chairmanship of Knight Ridder. And Larry Jinks, managing editor of the Miami Herald, who also rose to high leadership at Knight Ridder. When Clark talks about these men, he uses phrases like ethical, strong moral compass, my heroes. When Clark Hoyt was completing his assignment as ombudsman, called the public editor at the New York Times, he wrote this in 2010. For the past 3 years, my assignment has been to try to help this newspaper live up to its own high journalistic standards. I have variously deplored the overuse of anonymous sources, warned against the creep of opinion into news analysis, and worried about the preservation of the Times' quality on the internet. I have sometimes felt, he wrote, less like a keeper of the flame and more like an internal affairs cop. Today, some say that at a time when public attacks on the news media are so broad and so angry, this is not a time for us to criticize ourselves, lest we give ammunition to our detractors. But I disagree. I think that constructive, well-informed criticism from those who know our profession the best has never been more important than it is today. Only by holding ourselves to the highest standards can we differentiate good journalism, real journalism, from the schlock and the false. Clark Hoyt has been practicing and fostering great journalism, the real McCoy, for a very long time. For this, we honor him tonight with the W.M. Kiplinger Award for Distinguished Contributions to Journalism. Please welcome Clark Hoyt.
Thank you, Knight, for the most generous introduction anybody could ever receive. I'm especially touched by this award because your grandfather, W.M. Kiplinger, began a proud family tradition of strong, independent journalism 97 years ago, which you are carrying forward under challenges he could not have imagined. And I'm humbled to be in the company of those who have received this distinction since its inception in 1983. I was fortunate to enjoy the majority of my career, 38 years, at a newspaper group that, like Kiplinger, had deep family roots. Though Knight Ridder was a publicly traded company and sold relatively early in the waves of change buffeting print media, my colleagues and I always knew we were fulfilling a journalistic mission vital to a free society. And we knew that our top leadership put that mission first, even when Wall Street thought the only worthy goal was quarterly earnings growth. For those of us who came up through the Knight side, our model was our founder, Jack Knight, a man of fiercely independent views who loved nothing better at a meeting of his editors than to get a good argument going over some issue of the day. He especially relished it when an editor disagreed with him. It was his way of saying, stand up for what you think is right and run your paper the way you see fit. In his 70s, Jack Knight wrote fearlessly against the war in Vietnam, earning the anger of his Republican friends, the Johnson administration, and even General William Westmoreland, the American commander, who said that opposition at home gave comfort to the enemy in the field. Jack Knight would not back down. He won a Pulitzer Prize for his columns. In that same spirit, when John Walcott and reporters in the Knight Ridder Washington Bureau produced reporting 35 years later, calling into question the credibility of the Bush administration's case for invading Iraq, Tony Ridder, our CEO, stood firm against pressure. He never second-guessed, even when doubters pointed out that other news organizations weren't being so skeptical. I've been thinking a lot about this history as the new administration in Washington presents falsehoods as alternative facts, calls reporters the most dishonest human beings on earth, describes us as the opposition party, and tells us to keep our mouths shut. In the rich history of conflict between a free press and those in government power, we are seeing something extreme today. But as we have witnessed in just the last several days, and even right today, the best among us are doing their jobs and holding those in authority to account, with dramatic results and without flinching at the resulting blowback. In the face of a concerted effort to undermine their legitimacy, reporters, editors, and their companies are standing tall, not as an opposition party, but as journalists devoted to the facts. A couple of weeks ago, Taylor Batten, the editorial page editor of the Charlotte Observer and the son of legendary Knight Ridder leader Jim Batten, wrote a column after a parishioner at his church said, with judgment, not sympathy, that it must be a bad time to be an editor. Taylor wrote that no, it's a great time to be an editor or a journalist of any kind. And he quoted Jack Knight's simple definition of newspapers' mission: get the truth and print it. A lot has changed culturally, politically, economically, and technologically since those words were written, but they are still the very heart of what we have to do: get the truth and print it. Thank you.